Is your village missing its idiot? Well, the legislature's in session. That might be where they are. This is the headline. Welcome to the headline. I'm Michael Quinn Sullivan, filling in for Brandon Waltens. He'll be back with you next week. The past 2 weeks have given us real insight to the difference between what happens when you fight and when you don't fight. We saw that in Congress and we saw that in the Texas legislature. In just a moment, we're going to see a clip of an interview that Luke Macias did with U.S. Representative Keith Self. Keith Self was one of those 20 patriots who decided to fight, and they've now been delivering already some tangible good for the American people. Let's check it out.
And so I wanted to ask you to come on to explain in layman's terms what some of these reforms are and how they will actually impact the average citizen.
The average citizen on the street in CD3 north of Dallas, I will tell you, government spending is the central issue of this Congress. Because just since I retired from the military in 1919, just those 23 years, I will tell you the national debt has gone from $10 trillion to $31 trillion in those few years. And the line is almost vertical on the national debt. So there are several of these rules that will get at that. We've got points of order that have been restored on various budget bills. We've got a supermajority now that must be in place for a tax increase. We're using the FY 2020 fiscal year as the baseline. So all of those the average citizen will see those in effect when we reduce government spending. And then over the baseline years in the future, we'll start to see that come down. I think we're in trouble. We've got to start to change the trajectory of the national debt. We've got to enforce the border.
I think a lot of us would agree that the United States is headed for trouble. But thanks to Keith Self and the other patriots in the U.S. House of Representatives who were willing to fight last week, this week, and in the weeks ahead, they have set the stage for Americans, for conservatives, to be able to confront those troubles head on. Now, if you enjoyed that little snippet of the interview that Luke Macias conducted with U.S. Representative Keith Self, all you got to do is go to texasscorecard.com, click shows, and check out the Luke Macias Show podcast. There you can listen to that interview and the other shows that Luke has done. I want to contrast, though, what we saw happen in Washington, D.C., what we saw happen in the United States House of Representatives, where you had just this barest of majorities, and yet, because 20 conservative patriots were willing to fight, they have set the stage for many wins to come. I want to contrast that with what we saw happen this week in the Texas House of Representatives. Here we are in Texas, in the Lone Star State, in the Texas Senate, in the Texas House, with big majorities of Republicans. And yet, in those two chambers, we could not find people willing to fight. Well, that's not fair. There were 5 in the Texas House of Representatives who were willing to fight. I'm joined now by State Representative Bryan Slaton, one of those guys who is willing to fight to set the stage for future victories for conservatives. So, Mr. Slaton, why does it seem like so many of your self-described conservative colleagues, why does it seem they are so willing to capitulate to the cronies in Austin by giving committee chairmanships to Democrats? Do they really think that it's going to provide actual results for their conservative colleagues, for their conservative constituents? What's going through their minds?
Well, I don't know. I think there's some that are concerned. They've been told that, all their stuff's going to die if they don't support. And maybe they've kind of believed that. and it may be true, but either way, they believe it, and they're letting that supersede their other thoughts. Then there's others that just kind of realize the mess they're in, and they don't know what to do. This is an awkward situation, right? I mean, Republican controlled, but yet, we have one of our 8 priorities killed on the floor, not allowed to have debate or anything. And so now the
On day
question,
two, on day two.
yeah, on day 2, now how welcome are the other 7? And that's a question nobody knows the answer to. And so these members are trying to think about a situation they've never been in. And I think there's a lot of them that agree with us. But then there's the level of, are you going to do something about it? Are you going to speak up? Or are you just going to say, well, I don't want to get in the middle of it? And so I think there are so many things, like almost anything you can think of is happening between the, 87 members we have. It was a very brute force political move to stop the debate yesterday. It wasn't what we saw in D.C., where there was discussion, debate, discussion. You saw Kevin McCarthy walk up to Chip Roy. You saw Kevin McCarthy walk up and speak to Matt Gaetz. Now, I'm sure there might have been some conversations behind closed doors that weren't pleasant, but on the floor, you saw discussion. Hey, what's going on? Where are we at? What can we do? That was happening. Here, it was just the vote was not going to happen.
Yeah, so it's interesting, Mr. Slaton, that we've often heard it said that the job of the speaker is to protect the members, right? And it feels like on day 2 this week of the legislative session, protecting the members, or at least the Republican members, seem to be the furthest thing from anyone's mind. That, as you kind of alluded to, the idea of letting folks cast what they knew would be a losing vote, so they could go home and say, "Oh well, I tried." But there are some number of members who are now going to go home. And this is going to be a primary issue. This is going to be an issue that separates them from donors. It's going to be an issue that separates them, as you mentioned, from their kind of grassroots activist types. Are there members who are worried that maybe this is the legislative session that they're running headlong into, one in which a speaker doesn't care if they get cut up?
Well, I mean, it's possible. Right? It's definitely possible, but I also know that there's just kind of an attitude here that if you're with us, we will protect you, and maybe maybe they have confidence that it doesn't matter what they do, or what the speaker does, or what it may, that they'll be okay. Um, I think there's a lot of confidence on their side. I mean, why would they do this, right? Why wouldn't they just have the vote and vote it down like they did last time? Um, for them to do this, I mean, there's just a lot of confidence in this move.
It actually seems to communicate a lack of an actual lack of confidence. That maybe there was some concern from the leadership team that if this was on the floor, if they actually had to take a vote, that maybe that vote wasn't going to go so well.
And that's true as well. But I think these members are all having to process this, and so I think there's some that see it like I mentioned, maybe a lot of confidence that oh, we'll be fine, we don't care because we're together. But there might be some amongst their ranks that are having conversations with voters back home that maybe aren't at that same level, and maybe they're thinking, yeah, maybe this happened because there wasn't. I mean, yes, in where leadership is, I'm not sure, but amongst the other members, yes, it's anything on that array of it. What this was a bully move that they're scared of, or maybe this is just a bully move that, hey, we got this, we're fine. They can complain all they want. We'll make sure that you get what you need to get reelected. So I don't know.
Yeah. So right at this moment, we are, call it 56 days from the first day that legislation can be heard on the floors of the Senate and the House, absent a gubernatorial declaration of an emergency. What advice do you give to citizens over these next 56 days. What are things they can be doing if they want to try to influence some of the very important policy fights that the legislature is going to have ahead of it?
Constituents have to say, hey, what happened here was not a good thing. And we don't appreciate it whatsoever. This is what we signed up for, to vote for you, put signs in our yard, give you money, go to the convention. I mean, you name it. We did not sign up for this. And we need this to change. We need to know that when we have a legislative priority, it's welcomed for debate. Could it fail on a vote on the floor? Yes. But at least it's going to be welcome debate and discussion. And that's what needs to happen. And because I think people wouldn't be as upset if things were handled a little bit more respectful and tactful. I mean, people like to talk all the time. I don't like the strategy. They get mad at conservatives, like, oh, the strategy, they're too aggressive, they're too mean. Well, what was this? It was pretty aggressive. And so my thing is just don't give up. I mean, don't give up. Keep talking. Because if you give up, you're sending them a message that we can treat you poorly. And you'll forget about it, you'll move on, or you'll quit. So therefore, we can keep doing what we're doing. So that's my message, is don't quit. Because if you do, they win. And also, they don't learn. I mean, just like even with small things, like if I say something to you that is disrespectful to you, well, I have to apologize and say, I didn't realize that upset you, Michael. I didn't know that upset you. So I want to apologize, fix it, and move on. Well, that's got to happen between the voters and the elected officials. You got to say, y'all have wronged us. What you did, we don't appreciate. We think it was bad taste. Considering what we are, we're supposed to be unified, supposed to be together. And elected officials need to say, you know what? I think we might have made a mistake here, and we want to make it up to you. Now, that's a tough ask of elected officials, but that's what needs to happen. You want to talk about unifying our party? That would absolutely unify our party. I mean, I believe that if Speaker Phelan came out and said, well, even if he defended, that was a proper point of order, and I had to do it. But let me tell you something. I also get where y'all are coming from. Let's do this. Oh my gosh, you want to talk about unifying our party? They can do it in a heartbeat. But we'll see if that happens. But that's what we got to do.
All right, well, coming to us from his office in the Texas State Capitol, State Representative Bryan Slaton, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. Make sure that you like this video, that you subscribe to our content, and be sure to hit that little notification bell on the screen. That way you'll know whenever Texas Scorecard is putting out video content. I look forward to seeing you out around Texas.
Do you want to get your news from people who share your values? Texas Scorecard, real news for real Texans.